Hey, writers, and welcome to our novel editing chat, where me and my lovely friends here are going to talk about the realities and struggles of editing your novel, as well as sharing some tips, some motivation, some resources we found helpful in beating common editing blocks like discouragement, overwhelm, and procrastination, so you can finally finish your book. If you've also been slogging through edits lately, perhaps caught in an editing slump where it feels like you might never get your story right and be stuck in editing land forever, please put a big me too in the comments and let's watch how many people agree, because I'm sure there's going to be a ton of them. And if nothing else, we really, really hope that you get this out of this talk, that you are not alone in feeling like this. And that includes us. And I'm going to have my lovely co-hosts introduce themselves so you can get to know them a little bit and their editing experience. So Savannah, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, hi, I'm Savannah J. Goins. I'm the author of The Glycinian and The Cubanian. Those are my two self-published novels, with the third coming out later this year. So including those books and all my complete first drafts, I'm currently working on my 10th novel. Now, not all of those are revised and ready to go, but if we're counting first drafts, I'm working on my 10th novel right now. And so let's see, what else? I've also, I've had a full manuscript request from an agent, and I've had a couple of requests for partials from agents at conferences. So, that's a little bit of, showing some stuff that I've been able to do. And I've also offered editing services in the past. I've since decided that's not for me. It's hard enough to edit my own stuff, so I'm not currently offering those anymore. But I do enjoy line editing, especially. But anyway, I'm not doing that anymore, but I do have some experience with that. And also, if you guys have heard of Nadine Brandeis, who published Fox, she's got Fox and Romanov. She was my first editor, actually, for The Glycinian. I was, I think, one of her last clients before she got too big name and busy to really do as much editing as she did before. So that is where I'm at with editing right now.
I love it. Holly, you want to introduce yourself next?
Yes, I am Holly. My handle is Write Holly Davis. I'm a YA and middle grade fantasy writer, and I am hoping to be traditionally published. I've queried in the past, and I am working on my fourth novel currently, and it will be the third one that I will try querying. So for me, it's been, trial and error with realizing, how developmental edits are harder for me. And so it's been like going through each novel, I'm learning something, different about my, editing process, because every book is different too. But so, my biggest struggle is it's hard for me to feel like good enough, when I call a project finished, because I always feel like there's something I can improve on. And especially since I've been through the query trenches, like I'll say something's done, but then I don't get the response I want. So then I'm still tweaking things, when I'm faced with rejection. So it's just been hard for me to feel like, just to feel like I'm good enough, and to feel like, to know when things are okay and when to move on, and sorting all of that out.
Totally there with you. And then we have the lovely Alicia.
Hey guys, so I'm writer Alicia Grumley. That's my handle. You'll see it there on the bottom of the screen. And I am kind of coming at this from a totally different perspective than the other three lovelies here tonight. I'm going to come at it from a perspective of how you can edit if you're more of a pantser like me. I'm sure if you've followed Brittany or followed Holly or followed Savannah and you've seen any of our other conversations, you've heard me say before that I'm a pantser pretty through and through. I kind of say planter, but it's pretty pantser, guys. Let's be realistic. So the editing just looks a little different, I've found, from their experience and what they've said, what they're going through. So I thought it might be valuable for you guys to hear about that kind of perspective too. So that's kind of what I'll be going through. And I write YA, I write poetry, I write some nonfiction. I have a self-care advocacy blog. So those are kind of my genres that I deal in.
Yeah. You guys are awesome. I'm so glad you're all here. And if you guys don't know me yet, if you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Brittany Wang. I currently have 3 writing projects in progress, but I've been working on my debut YA fantasy novel for a few years now. I've gone through editing for betas and then editing with beta feedback. I've edited to submit to mentoring opportunities and agents, and have recently been working with a developmental editor in preparation to finally self-publish. But for me, it's gotten really tough and pressure-filled as I get closer to these final edits and actually publishing. I think one of my biggest blocks is just the fear of others' opinions and having the unrealistic expectation that everyone will love my story. It probably won't happen because that's just people. But that can get me stuck. And so I love that I have these wonderful ladies as friends. And as I've talked to them, especially like the past couple of months, I've realized, wait, it's not strange to feel like this. It's not unusual to get stuck a lot, to feel mentally and emotionally tapped out at times, and frankly, to feel like a terrible writer while editing. So great, at least I'm not alone. And yet we don't want to keep feeling like this. I can see in the comments that a lot of people are saying, yeah, I'm procrastinating, I'm doing these other things, I'm getting, discouraged here, I don't know what to do about this. And we definitely want to chat with you guys as we go along. But we also wanted to identify like just some basic ways we can get into these blocks. And I'm going to bring up a screen here because there's 5 ways that we've sort of identified that we think are pretty common. And we'd love for you guys to put in the chat box which of these 5 ways, and it could be a couple of them if you identify with more than that, that you feel like are your biggest blocks right now. So the first block might be that you, like me, are fearing others' opinions and letting others down. This is especially if you're preparing for someone to read your work or give feedback. So like beta readers, agents, or even getting reviews after you've published. So you can write number 1 if that's you. Number 2 is seeing your story's problems, but not knowing how to improve them or fix things. Or maybe you're number 3, you know what needs to be changed, but you don't know what to tackle first, and you're wondering if you can fix it correctly. Maybe you're number 4, feeling overwhelmed with the amount of editing to do and how long it will take. And I think all of us struggle with number 5, where you're comparing your work, your journey, or your progress to other people. And I think this is especially just happens all the time because we have shelves of perfectly edited books that just like seem like, how did it just like popped out like this, right? Like the author just one day woke up and wrote this whole thing. And we know that's totally bogus because there are acknowledgement pages of like people upon people that have helped them get it to this place. But still, it's just sort of like, how long is it going to take me to get to actually getting my book in this state and comparing your journey to other people's. So I see 3s and 4s and 5s. And as you guys are, sort of identifying where you've struggled, we thought it'd be really cool for each of us to share like a specific time that each of us have struggled with editing and what specifically helped us get out of that block. And then after we share, we have a ton more tips we want to share, including some of our favorite editing resources. We even put together a small list of editing affirmations that you can use to help get yourself pumped up whenever you're feeling discouraged. And as we share, we'd love for you guys to keep sharing in the comments as well, and put any of your tips that you have in the chat box too. But Holly, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, I would. So that's why I'm grateful that because I've edited a couple novels now, I kind of know okay, I don't really like developmental edits as much as I like line edits. So I'm going to need to, find a way to get through this, and I might need to change up my strategies. But so what I realized when I was editing the Celestial Code and Bargo's Riddle is that I was just feeling really overwhelmed with everything that needed to be done. And that made me paralyzed, and I procrastinated because I just was like, there's too much to do, so I'm just not going to do any of it, which obviously makes, me feel even worse because I feel bad that I'm not editing or doing anything writerly related. And especially with a Bargo's Riddle, changing it from YA to middle grade and then back to YA. And it was just a lot of just back and forth and stuff. So I was just how do I do all of this? But what I found, what really helped me, so I did this right away with Project Diamond, and it's been a godsend, is printing out my novel in a different format. And what I did this time is I actually made a proof copy, which I don't have with me, which is sad, but I did that on KDP, and it just made it super fun because it gave me like a different way of looking at my work in progress. And another thing was using my developmental edits checklist that I have on my website. And that gave me a general guideline of what to look out for and make sure that I wasn't missing anything, because I had already had ahead of time, okay, make sure to, look for, sound character arcs and, showing, not telling, things like that. Oh, I actually have that printed out here. My developmental edits checklist. So it was like, okay, there's characters, setting, plot, and then a whole bunch of miscellaneous. So it's like, as I'm going through my edits, I have this game plan, and I'm not just like willy-nilly, just like, I guess I'll look at this. Is this a plot hole, And then the last thing that really helped me was giving myself enough time to edit, which I am still working on this because I sent out my draft to beta readers like a week later than I wanted to, but I always give myself such tight deadlines, and then I'm freaking out because, I'm like, well, this is taking me longer to do. Developmental edits is a little bit harder for me. I shouldn't give myself such tight deadlines because that's stressing me out, and then that's what's making me procrastinate. So trying to just be kind to myself and give myself enough time is also the key to success for me.
Definitely. Yeah. I always feel like I set myself a time, and even when I give myself a little extra time, I'm like, wait, no, I need like twice as much time.
Exactly. So like be patient and give yourself grace.
Yes, definitely. I love it. Savannah, do you have a time you want to share?
Yeah, so when I got my first edit letter from Nadine, I thought, wow, this is a sign that I am not a writer, because surely nobody ever in the history of the world has had so much read on a manuscript. Like and like encouraging words is my love language. So like I don't know if that makes me like be more affected by criticism necessarily, even though it's constructive criticism, I don't know. But then before I had any kind of thick skin, I was crushed. I probably cried. I don't remember, but I saw like and she was very, very kind about everything. She was not mean to me at all, but just like, I was like, wow, nobody can write if they've got this many problems in their manuscript. And I slaved over it for a year before I paid a ton of money to have a developmental edit done. And then I was like, well, this is proof that I'm clearly not cut out for this. But I've since learned that happens to everybody, and that is a perfectly normal thing. And all you can do is just fix one thing at a time and push through it. Somehow I did. I don't know how I did, because at the time I thought I would never get through it, but somehow I did. And I've published another book, and I've written a whole bunch since then. So it's just something you just have to persevere through, even though it is slow and not necessarily the most fun part. But like for me, drafting is my favorite thing in the world. I love drafting. NaNoWriMo is my favorite time of the year. Nothing is more exciting to me than NaNoWriMo. It's the best. But, then the rest of the year is like all those revisions. And, it's a necessary evil of writing. Like if you're going to produce books, you got to revise them. And I guess I decided that I would still finish the book because I said I would. I had told some people on Instagram, all of my like 3 followers at the time, that I was going to finish it. So I wanted to keep my word, and it was something I really wanted to do, and I knew that I might fail, but I wanted to try. It was worth trying to me. So I am glad that I did, and I encourage you all to do the same.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the accountability part, even if it is just to a couple of people. And if you guys don't know, I think a lot of you at this point know, but these are all ladies that I meet with like every single week. This is actually usually the time that we meet, and we keep each other accountable with our writer goals, with our writer business goals. And it's just so good. And even, we're not super hard on ourselves or each other when we don't meet something, but there is that like sense of like, okay, like I told them I was going to do this. And so at least I'm going to like do my best, and like, I'm not going to give up. And so I just love that so much too. Alicia, you want to share next?
Yes. So I kind of hang in that 2 to 3 problem range, right? Especially as a pantser, especially being more of a novice editor than the other 3 ladies. So for me, it's like, well, maybe I know what needs to be fixed, but I don't necessarily know how I'm going to do that, because as a pantser, I don't have that roadmap that the other 3 ladies here have, right? That is not something that my brain functions well within. But what I have found that works for me is reading the writing craft books like Save the Cat Writes a Novel and like Write Your Novel from the Middle by James Scott Bell. I really like this one. It's super short. You guys could probably get through this in like a weekend. I mean, it's literally like under 90 pages, I think. But I have found that looking for those scenes in my draft is really helpful because it gives me some focus of where to go during revising. So even though I don't have to plan it and like I'm not going to plot out the next scene, but if I realize that I'm missing a beat, or if I realize that, you know, I'm missing part of, you know, like that middle buildup that Belle talks about in this book, it gives me a little bit of direction that I can work on in revising. And like that editing gives me a little bit more of a zoomed in focus, like a microscope, right? So that's really helpful for me to know that I can edit even though I'm still a pantser, because I sometimes feel this pressure of, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to edit this because I didn't have this tight, detailed plot going into it. But I do have a good story, and I trust myself that I have a good story. And the other part of this that I'm kind of like well known among the group for saying is like, that is April Alicia's problem, okay? And it started out as that is December Alicia's problem because that is after Nano. And the point of that is, for me, November Alicia's only problem is to draft, right? So drafting Alicia's problem is not editing Alicia's problem. Editing Alicia's problem is to work with what drafting Alicia gave her. And drafting Alicia did the best she could do in that time frame. So I don't want any of us getting caught in this like, oh, I'm such a bad writer because I wrote this so long ago. I want us all honoring the hard work that we've put into it by like saying like, drafting Alicia did the best she could do when she was doing it. And editing Alicia is better now because drafting Alicia did what she did. So it's more of a honor your hard work by not letting yourself get bogged down into this negative editing self-talk slumps, you know, because like then the story is never going to get into the world if you don't believe that it's fine. So editing Alicia's problems are editing Alicia's problems. That is April Alicia's problem to deal with. That is not March's Alicia's problem. And that really has worked for me because I can still pants and I can still feel like I've got that freedom to work within my story and to discover that story. Because part of pantsing is like discovery writing too, like, right? Part of it is that. But it helps give me kind of like the buoys to stay between, the navigational buoys, you know, like, okay, I don't care how we get from point A to point B. I just know we have to get there. And that really works for me, knowing that like drafting Alicia is doing drafting Alicia's job. Drafting Alicia is not meant to be editing Alicia. Right. Editing Alicia is also not meant to be drafting Alicia. You know, like I feel like those are different hats that I want to put on, and I want to keep them that way because it keeps it's protecting the drafting for me is what that does. It allows me to protect the creativity and the way that I want to do that, so that even though the editing is a little scarier on the other end, because I'm like, oh, maybe I totally don't have one beat that I'm really probably needing to have in this story, you know, or like maybe this beat needs to go sooner, or, you know, like all those things. But taking those formulaic structure writing books and plugging in my story and plugging in my draft has really been an effective way for me to edit as I've gone through some of these projects that I'm working on.
Yeah. And I think you can even pull that into like the different parts of the editing process, because like if you try to edit every single part of the story at once, or every single like level of it, it's really, really hard. So like, that's why a lot of people do like a developmental stage, and then, you know, line edit stage, and then like copy edit and all this different stuff. And I can't find the comment. Someone said that they were like struggling because they would developmental edit, but then they would get sucked into doing all the line edits. And you could apply what Alicia just said to be like, this is line edit Alicia's problem. Right now we are developmental Alicia.
Right. Remember, you can pay people to do some of these things for you. Like there are people whose job it is to help you with that. So that's always really reassuring to me as a pantser too. I'm like, oh, I can get it to a point where I can pay somebody else to help me with this.
Right.
Not that that's always feasible for all of us all the time, but if it's something that is a weakness of yours, you will build it into your budget eventually for your project, I'm sure.
Right. Love it. Cool. Yeah. And for me, I've been dealing with a lot of bouts of discouragement, as my friends know, and I've shared a little bit on here. But here's some of the things that have been helping me. Like Holly was saying, sort of having like a checklist or like a revision tracker, which is something that I put together. I have a video about it, and I'll share a little bit about that later. But that was really helpful because I have a plan. So I like having a plan first, but then I definitely hear you guys about like knowing what you need to fix, but not knowing how to fix it. And then I've sometimes had ideas, but then I have a hard time implementing it. And I find I get really stuck. I've even spent hours on a specific scene, like I'm not even joking. And I'm just like, I can't do this to myself. And it gets me really discouraged to like go into the next editing session or the next day, because I'm just like, this editing session was just like took all day. And how did that even happen? So one thing that has been really helpful for me is just setting timers for myself in different ways. So like if I don't feel like editing, I'm like, okay, I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes and that's all the editing I'm going to do. And then when the timer goes off, I'll be like, okay, usually I feel like I've gotten into a groove and then I just want to keep sort of going at it. But like sometimes the hardest thing is actually just starting. And that's where the procrastination, if you feel like you're procrastinating, just start with 15 minutes. Like just get your butt in the chair and just start. The other thing that really helped me is when I was getting into these places of like, even like a paragraph, I would spend like an hour on a paragraph. I'm like, Brittany, what are you doing? And so I would set a timer to work on a specific scene for a specific amount of time, maybe like a half an hour for a certain scene. And when that timer went off, I would say like, okay, I am moving on. I am keeping going because I can't get stuck here forever. And what would happen is that if I kept going and I was editing future scenes, I would then be able to see that harder scene in the context of the bigger story, and then be able to be like, oh, like I actually know what should go here because it's going to lead into this. Right. And that was something that my CP Bethany told me to do. And I kept wanting to like be like, no, I need to fix this whole scene first. And she was right. I should just keep going. And the last thing I wanted to say is like, as I would get an idea for a scene finally, and I would want to try it. Sometimes, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but I would look at the scene and I would be like, okay, the scene is like, even though there's things to fix, like I sort of don't want to touch it because what if what I edit actually ends up being worse than what I have right now? And then I end up losing what I have and I can't revert back to it. So what I started doing this time around was like, I'd have the original scene and then a blank page. And I would start like kind of retyping the whole scene from scratch and adding and changing as I went, or just starting with something completely different and trying something. And then at least I had the original scene. So if there was anything I wanted to pull over, or I said, this was crap, I need to go back to what I had, then I didn't lose it. And I think that just got me out of the rut of being like, okay, like what if I can never do anything better than this? It was just like, well, I have nothing to lose if I start with a blank page. So those were things that were helping me a little bit. We have a bunch of other tips, like random tips that we just threw together because we were like, oh, this is good. Like people should know this. But feel free, you guys here, if you see like a specific comment that you want to respond to or specific question. If you guys have specific questions, put them in the chat box and we can sort of go back and forth a little bit. Or if you guys see like a tip that you wrote down in our outline that you like are ready and gearing up to like share, let me know. But yeah, does anybody have anything?
Bethany Hensel has a question. And so should I read it out loud? Sure. She asked, what about when you get an edited manuscript back and you work on, but it's just not working? What happens when you just don't know what to do? And that's when lovely friends come in. So if your book has already been beta read or read by critique partners, you can go back to them because they've read it, and so they can give you some insights into things that you might not be able to see. That was something that I immediately looked at that question because Savannah recently read Project Diamond, and she's like, hey, if you have anything you want to bounce off of me, I can give you some ideas, or if you need any troubleshooting. So it helps if someone has read it, then you can ask them about it. Or even if they haven't read it, you can kind of say, this is the part that I'm having some issues with. Is there anything you can help me with? And that can give you some insights.
Yeah, I love that. And go ahead, Savannah. And then I'll share.
I was just going to say, if you are feeling, or if you feel like you're short on writer friends or don't have any friends available at the same time that you need someone to look at it, or if you're not ready for other people to look at it yet, taking a break is really, really helpful. Like if I have been stuck in one manuscript for a long time, it all gets jumbled in my head and I cannot see anything clearly. It's all murky and it's too hard to get. So I will leave it alone for a month. I know somebody who always leaves things alone for 6 months before coming back to them. I don't like to wait that long because I start missing it and I want to come back to it. But after a little bit of time, I need a break and I will just take a month off. And you could just take a break from writing if you're burnt out and need to do other stuff. I get burnt out on projects, but not writing. So I'll take a break from a project, but I will work on something else. Usually if I can, I'll draft something new because I like drafting new things. The problem with always drafting new things when you get stuck is that then you have a whole lot of drafts and not a lot of revised things, which is where I'm currently at right now. I think taking a break is really good. Now, there's a balance between avoiding a problem versus taking a healthy break so you can come back with a fresh mind, but only you can decide how that is for you. That is something that nobody else can tell you. It's different for everybody. So just experiment and, see how much of a break might be helpful for you.
Yeah. I love that. I would also say too, like you can, like sometimes I think we think of editing as like I have to stare at my manuscript until something clicks. And I've actually really enjoyed having editing sessions that are like brainstorming sessions. Like I'll write down all the issues that I'm having and all like the stuck places I'm having. And then I'll just like have a paper out with me and like see like, okay, this is the issue. What are 10 solutions that I can think of? Because usually the first couple that you think of are like the cliche ones or the ones that have been done all the time or like aren't the best for you. Once you get to like the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th one, you might have something going. So it might take some brainstorming sessions. I also really liked that Anna just shared that you could contact your editor and see if it's possible to schedule a brainstorming session with them, drafting specific scenes to better flesh out your novel. I actually got to do this with my editor. Not every editor offers this. You could definitely reach out, but that's the thing that you can think of when you are looking at an editor is asking them ahead of time, like, is this something we could build in? Because I know I found that super helpful with my editor as well. Yes, ma'am.
I have another thing along those lines. So you can do this with a variety of different apps, but the Marco Polo app has been like my favorite thing ever the past year. So I've got a couple of writer friends, including these ladies who I talk to pretty much every day. And even if you don't have a lot of writer friends yet, if you just have a friend who will listen to you, even if they can't listen to you at the same time that you're free, you can leave them a Marco Polo message. And just knowing somebody's going to listen to it there's something magical about that. And I will talk out an issue and solve it myself just because I was talking it out in a way that I knew somebody was going to listen to. So sometimes you can figure out all your problems yourself just by talking to someone. Sometimes people have really helpful suggestions, and sometimes you just figure it out yourself and you just needed to talk about it. And no amount of thinking about it is going to get past what you're stuck on. But if you talk about it, something magical happens, and sometimes issues get solved.
Yes, I love it. Bethany, I hope that was helpful. I see you have another question, but I saw someone else had another question too. So I'm going to bump to theirs just so everybody gets a little something, something. But we'll try to come back to that one because I saw, hello, Tyne, I think it is. How do you know when you're done? I go through phases of choosing to be done and then backing out of publishing my YA novel. I am so with you. Like pushing it off. What do we think about this, guys? Any thoughts right away?
I mean, at some point, so this happened to me recently. I was working on rewriting a first chapter of a project. And somebody looked at me and said, like, well, we weren't in person, but we were on the phone. And she's like, when is it going to be done for you? Like, when, like, are you just going to keep doing this? Are you never going to put your story into the world? And I was like, well, no, like it's got to be done when it's good enough. And she goes, well, but who's deciding that's good enough? You're telling yourself that it's not good enough. So let it be. Just stop touching it. Tell yourself you can only work on it a set number of times. So it's kind of like setting those like time limits for working on the scene and just saying like, okay, like I'm not touching this anymore for right now. And maybe, hello, time, it's maybe like, okay, after I've queried and I've gotten, acceptance, or, after I've gotten 15 rejections or whatever the arbitrary number is for you. Maybe it's, that. But like at some point you have to say to yourself, or have somebody that you trust enough say to you, but when is it going to be done? Like you're just going to be caught in this loop, if you like editing loop, if you don't, take a break from it for a little bit. And like that break might really work in and help you decide that you're done enough for it too, because you worked really hard on it. And yeah, of course, there's always something we could make better. I think, all published authors would say like, oh, I would go back and I would change that entire scene, or I would take that out. And, I could rewrite that so much better now. But the point is like, it's good. It's good. And you're only thinking it's not because you're so bogged down in it, because it's your story and it's your baby and it's your vulnerabilities. But to somebody else who hasn't read it and who hasn't enjoyed it and who hasn't like poured the blood, sweat, and tears into it that you have, they're like, this is great. They wouldn't even know that you had things you wanted to change. So I think just finding those trusted people, or like taking a good hard look at yourself in the mirror and saying like, am I doing this because I really am trying to make the story better and the story needs it to be better? Or am I doing this because I'm in the editing loop and I'm playing into my fear rather than the fact that this story needs to be in the world?
Well, yeah. I think similar, Bethany's question actually kind of ties in, like, how do you know when you should just scratch a manuscript? Because maybe the core of it isn't working, or trying to save it and do meticulous editing. So anything from those two, if you guys have thoughts. But my immediate thing for both of these questions too was having beta readers really helps with this. And I think that if, you'll be able to tell by having some feedback if the people are just like, this is not making sense, or this is not compelling, or I'm getting lost, or whatever, then you can sort of pull from that instead of like your own insecurities and say, okay, objectively, people are getting confused, or this is not pulling them in, or they're not getting hooked. But if people are saying, hey, we love it, and, like this has like a lot of promise, we just see like this, that, or the other thing that could, be improved, then you sort of have an answer there. So if you're having a hard time doing it yourself, beta readers are really helpful.
Yeah, Esther kind of said what I was going to say about like fiddling with word choice instead of making any real changes. Like that's what I was going to say. So that's good advice.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the camp that no words are wasted words. Okay, so if you wrote them and you put some passion and heart into them, they are not wasted. Maybe you can't use them for this project, but and Savannah has really helped me with this, and Holly has really helped me with this, and Brittany has really helped me with this. I will go through a point every year, and I know when it is. It's in May. May is a really hard month for me personally. So I will get to a point where all of my friends tell me, you are not allowed to hit delete this month, because I get into this habit of like, nope, this all is awful. I don't want anything to do with this. I'm throwing this all away. I'm scrapping it all. Like it's nothing that's worth it. But for me, it's like there are other bigger personal things that I'm working through. So that's not an accurate depiction of those words. So like saying, should I scrap a project? I don't necessarily believe in scrapping projects in general, even though I want to sometimes. You can put it aside. You can start a brand new document, but scrapping those words that you worked hard for, you never know when those words are going to be able to come into a different story, or like you're going to have an idea, or you're going to be able to use a line that you worked through in that manuscript into a different story, or even later in that story. So I am working on not threatening deletion anymore. Like, and just like, it's like, is anybody paying enough attention to tell me I can't delete this? Because I have a little bit of that, like, what would happen if I deleted this? So it's more just like, if you're sick of it, maybe open up a new document. Like Brittany was saying earlier, like have it side by side and you can open it up. So then you've always at least got a copy of it, and you're not scrapping it. It's just putting it on hold. Maybe it's not the right time for it. But I worry about that term scrapping, because, so many of your words that you're working so hard for might not ever make it into the world if it is this scrap mentality. So reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle. Your word.
Anna is agreeing with you too. Yes. Savannah, go ahead.
Yeah, so similarly, sometimes there may be a part of the story that's working and a part that's not. And for me, I have a story that so it is a time travel. It starts off, it's a time travel, and it goes back in time to when in North America, when they were just Native Americans here. And I, in my heart and my ignorance at the time, I was trying to be inclusive, and I was trying to be, have my diverse cast. And I have a Native American friend at work who gave me a bunch of books to borrow, and she was encouraging me to write it because she thought it was a cool idea and all this stuff. I later realized that since I'm not Native American, I can't really write this. And everybody who I've met that is Native American is really tired of seeing Native Americans portrayed as like a magical people or something like that. And not having lived in that world myself, I did not realize that. So I realized that I am not the person to write a story taking place in that time with those people. So the first 16,000 words of that story, where it's just the other characters at the current time, is great. I'm keeping it. I can use it in some way later, but the rest of it, where they went back in time, I have to scrap all that because it is not something that really I can write or that people want to read from me. So I will still do something else with that eventually, because the beginning of that story is great, but I had to scrap the last 70K of it because it was really just not something that I could write. So there may be pieces of a story you can keep, or at least a concept you can keep, even if you have to rework a lot of other parts of it.
Yeah, agreed. Hopefully that's helpful, you guys. Let us know if it is, and if there's any other specific questions or struggles you guys are having. We do have a few more tips. If you guys want to look at our document and see if there's any specific ones you'd like to share, let me know. But I thought it might be fun to take a little break and show them our affirmations sheet. So for a lot of you, you might need some just really practical tips. So we're bringing that. We have some resources that we want to share with you in a little bit. But so much of editing is getting through this mindset block too. And so this is not a super comprehensive list, but they were just some of the affirmations that we found encouraging to us. And you can screenshot this list when it's all on the screen, and you can sort of use it as a mantra before you get into editing, or you're in editing and you're just a little discouraged, you need a pick me up. Here are some of them. So the first one is, you can say, I believe in my book. The world needs my book because, and you can put in your specific reason for your book. The next one, I'm already ahead because I've completed the first draft, which so many writers haven't even accomplished, which is something that, a lot of writers start, but they don't actually get from beginning to end. So if you've done that, way to go, you're already ahead. 3, just because editing is hard doesn't mean I should quit. It's hard. If it's hard, it means it's worth doing. Number 4, all my favorite authors have been in my shoes. Struggling through this does not make me a bad writer. This is a normal part of the writing process. Number 5, the only way to become a successful writer is to get through this hard part. Better parts are coming on the other side. Number 6, I won't be afraid to make mistakes and ask for help. I will give myself tons of grace. And number 7, the only way I truly fail is if I don't try. Any kind of failure only means I'm learning and getting better. So those are some of
writing is a way.
Say, how many times did Thomas Edison fail before he invented the light bulb? 10,000. 10,000 times. He tried 10,000 different prototypes of the light bulb before he found it, one that worked. One. Because he knew that it had to work. Can you do it enough? Do you believe it enough? We use light bulbs every day, friends. So just telling you, you might be writing someone's favorite story and they don't even know it yet.
That's right. Preach, Alicia.
No, I will too.
I screenshotted it. I'm like, I have to pull this up on my phone.
Yes. Oh, and I took it down, but if you guys need it back up to screenshot and you didn't, just let me know. Everybody's really excited. Amen to number 7. Yes, good writing is rewriting. Ooh, I like that one. We should add that one. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah.
7 is so good. Love this. Yay. I'm excited.
Heather.
Excited. Yes. So any other tips that we have listed that you guys just want to like sort of shout out before we wrap up with some resources that we want to give everybody at the end?
Savannah took one of my favorites, but I did say, like Eliza said to Alexander Hamilton, take a break, take a break, even if it's a short one, even if it's like a day or two away from the project. Take your break, go for a walk, do something like that. But the other one that Savannah didn't take yet is just remember to have some fun, because our stories resonate with people when we give them something that's real, and we can't spend every second editing, writing, revising, drafting, all of those things. We have to do things that are experiences so that we can give our characters depth and complexity. So have some fun.
Amen.
Yeah, and one of the things that I was realizing, because I was in the middle of editing Project Diamond for beta readers, but then I was also kind of on this social media hiatus, and I realized that like it kind of took me a little bit longer because I wasn't like using the community. So, a lot of people say like live write-in or writing sprints, but you can use those to do anything. And so I know that accountability and having that like, oh, I have to be on it this time, or like this person has this live stream up, really helps. So you can do those sprints, having it timed like Brittany was saying, but using those for your editing sprints too, because people post anything they want. Oh, I finished a puzzle, I finished my homework, whatever, Jessie doing her taxes, so everyone's always celebrating everything. And sorry, my cat's licking his butt in the background, so
I saw him jump up there and I totally zoned out.
Oh, okay. Just like
censored, Holly. We're gonna get taken down. Inappropriate.
It's all good. He looks like a black little blob to me. I can't see specifics. It's all good.
Like, I know exactly what he's doing. His legs just straight up. I apologize.
It's fine. Was that the end of your thought, Holly? I'm sorry.
Sorry, wonderful. Have fun.
Have fun. Yes. Agreed. I'll throw in here one that a tip I was using today that sort of bounces off one that Holly shared earlier of like putting your book in different formats. She mentioned printing it. You could also do an ebook version, which I have a video about if you don't know how to put like your draft into like an ebook format. And then Kindle can read it, or I know how to do it from the video I did. I know how to do it on an iPhone, and your Kindle app, you can have your phone read your manuscript back to you. And I've also realized that you can do it in Scrivener, which I've been doing a lot. And then what I'll do is sometimes I'll watch my manuscript as it's reading it to me and like make notes and edits as I go. But sometimes if I'm just trying to get the big picture and I'm like brainstorming and doing other things, today what I did is I put in like wireless headphones and I pressed play and I walked away, and I'm like cleaning and like doing things here and there. And all of a sudden, like I was like experiencing my story in a totally different way, and like noticing certain things that I'm like, oh, actually that connects to this, and I could like change that. And you could even, another thing that I did is like, even if you change like the font of your manuscript or the spacing or the font size, like sometimes that can just trick your eye because you've seen it so many times and you're not seeing like how you can make things different. If you put it in a different format, that can be really helpful. And I'm going to say one more thing and then I see Alicia's finger, but my CP Bethany Atazada, she came out with a video about how to format your book as an ebook. And that actually took some of those steps and changed the size of my Word document and like made it all fancy and like it looks like a real ebook. So as I'm reading it, instead of looking at it in like a Word doc version, it looks like an actual book, and it kind of motivates me to be like, this is a thing, like it's actually becoming a real thing and not just like a Word document on my computer. And for some reason that just like gets me out of my brain so that I can like look at it a different way. I don't know if I explained that the best way that I wanted to, but hopefully it makes sense. Alicia, I saw your finger.
So this was building on what you were saying about listening to it. So if you guys listen to audiobooks, maybe to fall asleep, this is where I was thinking, because your brain works through things while you're sleeping, right? It's subconscious. That's why we dream and all of that. So if you put it on and you fall asleep to it, and you know, just like that's all you're doing. You're falling asleep to it, and it plays through until it's done, or until, you know, your phone dies, or whatever it plays through till. And then like as you're working the next day, or as you're editing the next time, you'll be like, wait, there was something back here that your brain. So it's kind of like giving like double time, because you're like, you know, your brain uses sleep to work through things. So that might be a tip that somebody might be able to use. I don't know. I've never tried it. I'm just guessing that it could work for somebody.
I'd be super curious, because actually, I think it's blanking on her name. She's the author of Namesake and what's the other one? Fable. Somebody help me.
Oh,
Adrienne Young.
Adrienne
Yeah.
Young. Somebody was telling me that she sometimes she was saying like on her Instagram or something, that she goes to sleep like going over her story in her brain, which you actually listen to it, which I love that idea. But then she'll like dream dreams of her story, and like things will come to her like in like dream form, or she'll wake up and be like, oh, there's like this idea. So I think, just to say, Alicia, that I think it would work in different formats. So yeah.
That's so cool.
Any other tips that we wanted to share?
I have one.
Yep, go ahead.
Something that's been really helpful for me is just making decisions in editing, if you're doing developmental editing, because what I would do is I'd be like, I don't know how to fix this. So I would skip that and go try to work on something else, which sometimes works. Sometimes it helps to work in different places and then come to different places. But if you keep avoiding issues and they keep never getting solved, it gets a lot harder to solve them. So what I've been learning recently is that it's really helpful to be like, all right, I think it could work to fix it this way. This is the best way I can think of. I'm going to try this. And then I start working as if I am going to make that change, and I make that change in places. And then mostly it actually works. And I was just afraid of making a, you know, for sure decision. So usually it works. But if it doesn't, I find out a lot faster by trying it out than by avoiding it and trying to not think about it.
Yeah. No, that's good. Alicia.
This builds on what Savannah just said about this. And just because drafting Alicia and editing Alicia have different jobs doesn't mean they can't use the same tools, right? So one of the tools that both can use is to fix it both ways, right? Like Brittany was saying, like you make that list of like 10 options, take 2 of them, like 2 of your most likely options. And if you're drafting it, draft it both ways, because one of the ways you'll start drafting and be like, no, it needs to be the other way. Or, you know, like when you're editing it, if you edit it just one of the ways or both of the ways, and you're like, oh, wait, like this makes a little bit more sense. Even if you just write out, you know, like those, like that paragraph or that, you know, page or whatnot as 2 of the options. Because sometimes just like seeing it in black and white and reading it back out loud to yourself, like we're saying, having somebody else read it to you, reading it out loud to yourself too, you can hear things differently. So like, you know, like same tools, different jobs, same tools, different jobs.
Right. Love it. Cool. We're so glad that these tips are being helpful, you guys. Any other tips you want to share before we talk a little bit about some resources and kind of wrap up our time together? Let me know. And I also want to I saw someone say earlier that they hopped on later. This is going to be on replay. And what I've been trying to do with my recent videos is at the bottom, which actually, Holly, or Alicia, can you point to the bottom? Right down there, I'll break it up into sections, and you can actually, you can actually see titles where like I'll say like, this is where we shared the editing tips, and this is where we share the affirmations, and this is where we share the resources, so you can sort of pop around. So if you're showing up late, all of that will be on the replay for sure. But any other tips we want to share before resources? Are we good?
I think that's everything.
I think we're good. Cool. So I didn't put these in a slide, but we are going to just chat about them for a second. Some resources that we found helpful for editing. Alicia mentioned a couple books earlier, which I didn't link down below in the description, but I will right after this. So we have Write Your Novel from the middle. And then Save the Cat Writes a Novel. You also mentioned that one. And then in the description, I have a bunch of other ones. Holly, you had a couple that you mentioned. Did you want to share about any of those now?
Yes. So one of the first books I read for editing that I still use today and I swear by is the Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. just super helpful and comprehensive. So that's a good one. And then as far as websites, I like using Writers Helping Writers. They're the ones who wrote the Emotion Thesaurus and all the thesauruses. But their website has a ton of resources too for editing. And then also the Hemingway Editor app. This is more so for like line edits, which is why I linked it as a resource. So I'm like, oh, I love this one because it's super easy to use. I like to just like copy paste like a chapter at a time into the Hemingway Editor app. It's a website, so I don't know why it's called app. There might be an app, but I just use the website. And then it shows like instances where like the sentences are really difficult to read, like they're too wordy, or if you're using passive voice, or where you're using adverbs, and then the reader level, like the grade level. So it's like really comprehensive. So I really like that, because then you can go implement the changes and then like recheck and make sure that you're not being too wordy and you can catch things. So I really like that one as well.
Sorry to interrupt. That's free, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a free one. So
that one's free. So
like
that's like, I usually do that like towards the end when I'm like, you know, in the nitty gritty editing before, like I usually do that and then I read it like out loud. And then I'm like, when I read it out loud, I'm like, okay, this is like the final be all. It's like as perfect as it can be. And now I'm reading it out loud to like see how it sounds. Yeah. And then I have a whole editing tips playlist with all the videos that I've come out with on my YouTube channel. So I think Brittany linked that down below.
Yes. Yeah. If you love YouTube videos and learning through YouTube videos, Holly has a bunch. One of her videos is about the checklist, right? The editing checklist. So you can get that through there. And then I also have a playlist of my videos on editing as well. And in addition to the Hemingway Editor app, which I didn't know about, so I'm excited to check that out. I've been using Pro Writing Aid, which has a Chrome extension that you can have like a certain amount of accessibility without having to like upgrade to the next level. So you can have that for free. So I've been using that, and that also has like a lot of line editing stuff. And it can also, in the Chrome extension, it can actually also apply to like your emails and like all this other stuff. But it's where like Grammarly, if you've heard about that, is like more just general grammar, like stuff like Pro Writing Aid or the Hemingway Editors app are like more for like writers, which is really cool. And then this is going to sound like a weird kind of connection at first, but I've talked about it a couple times here, is that there's a Jessica Brody, who wrote Save the Cat Writes a Novel. She has a Writing Mastery Academy where you get access to like all her different courses. And she doesn't yet have a course just on revisions, but she has a course on fast drafting, which I took for the purpose of fast drafting. But there's a module in there that talks about her revision process and her revision tracker. And that's sort of what I based some of my revision trackers. So I have a video in my playlist about how I created that in Trello. And her module on that was just like so eye-opening and helpful. So I think you can get like a membership to like all of her courses for like $12 a month or something. So even if you did like $12 for 1 month and checked out the fast drafting course, like if you can find that module within the course, like it was like really, really cool. And she actually went through as well, I think, her own manuscript and like showed how she did some of the edits and stuff. So I think she wants to come out with a full revision course, and I'm like, once she does, I want to get back on there and be like, but I found that really, really helpful too. Cool. Let's see. I saw Bethany, we did answer your question earlier, so you can definitely watch it on the replay. And let's see, who is the author of Self-Editing for Fiction Writers, Holly?
Dave King. Mm-hmm.
And it is down below too in the description, so we have like a direct link there if you want to go check it out. Cool. Any final words of encouragement or final thoughts before we wrap up? This has been really fun, and it seems like it's been really helpful for you guys. So I'm very grateful that my friends came on to hang out with me and talk about it. But any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think like just knowing that you're not alone, and like one of the tips that I did have was, because it was eye-opening for me, like when I first started writing, I had it hadn't even been a year since I'd gotten back into writing, but I went to a writer's workshop, like just a one-day workshop. And this author, she was like, oh yeah, I forget how many books she had written, but she's like, oh, I thought that this was the best book that I had written, and then I gave it to my editor, and there was just all this red everywhere. And she had like an example, and a lot of authors do this where they make the pages like tiny so you can't see what they're writing, but you just see all the red, and it just looks like literally everything, literally the whole manuscript. And she was like, yeah, but then I did those changes and I came out with a better book. And so like seeing that, like even New York Times bestselling authors like have all of the red. So so just know that that's that normal part of the process, and you're one of us. So
One of us. We're so weird, you guys.
I love it. I love it. Oh gosh. Well, I hope you guys again found this really helpful. So much fun. Savannah, did you want to say something?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. I saw you going like this, and I was like, oh, I don't want to step on you.
No, you're good.
But yeah, you guys, I hope those resources down below are helpful. Feel free to rewatch this video. I'll put, all the little things. Breaking up the video so you can pop around. And if you have any other specific questions, especially if you're watching this on the replay, please let them put them in the comments. If you had fun during this live stream and you thought it was helpful, hit the like button and subscribe. I also have links to all these lovely ladies, either YouTube videos or Instagrams down below as well. And we just appreciate you guys so much hanging out with us. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you just leave this super encouraged and ready to tackle your edits, because the world needs your book. Cool. All right. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.